She couldn't scream, couldn't call for help, couldn't even whisper. Her throat was crushed. Her left leg was pinned by a steel rod, and somewhere above her, maybe 20 feet, maybe 50, the rest of the building was still deciding whether to finish the job. Most people in that situation would panic. Most people would thrash around in the dark, burn through their oxygen, before anyone even knew they were down there. But Reverie Calloway was not most people. In the pitch black, with blood pooling beneath her, and dust filling what was left of the air, she did something no one expected. A piece of Rubble, and she started tapping, not random, not desperate. Morse code, clean, precise, military grade, 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. When a Navy picked up that signal on the surface, a signal that should not have been coming from a 28-year-old NGO worker buried under 40 tons of concrete, the team leader stopped cold. He recognized that rhythm. He'd heard it before, a long time ago, from someone he could never forget. This is her story. The earthquake hit at 2:47 in the afternoon, local time. A Tuesday. Nobody saw it coming. Not the seismologists in Ankara. Not the local authorities. Assumes Antakya. With groceries in their arms and nothing on their minds but dinner 7.8 on the Richter scale. The kind of number that doesn't mean much until you feel it. Until the floor drops out from under you and the ceiling becomes the floor. And everything you thought was solid turns into dust and noise and reverie. Calloway, Rev, anyone who actually knew her, was on the 3rd floor of a building that had no business still standing. A 6-story concrete structure from the 1970s. No retrofit, no seismic reinforcement. Of building. That engineers call a soft story collapse waiting to happen. She knew that. She'd written it in her preliminary report that morning. She was in Antakya on assignment. 6 weeks with an international humanitarian relief organization. The same one she'd been working with since leaving the army 2 years ago. And medical assessment and structural triage, a dual role she'd trained for specifically. After leaving the army, she'd completed FEMA's urban search and rescue certification. Collapse structure, load path analysis, identifications. The organization needed people who could evaluate both the building and the bodies. Inside it, Reverend was one of maybe 30 people in the world qualified to do both. Her father had planted that seed years before she knew it. He'd taught her to read buildings the way he read terrain, where the weight goes, where the weakness hides, where it all comes apart. Thought it was just another one of his survival games. It wasn't. She was standing in what used to be a hallway on the 3rd floor when the first tremor hit. A low rumble, like a truck passing too close. In her knees before she heard it. Then came the second wave, the real one. The building didn't collapse all at once. That's not how it works. It's not like the movies where everything falls in one clean motion, apart in pieces. The joints fail first, then the columns. Then gravity takes over and the floors pancake, one on top of another, like a deck of cards pushed from the side. Rev had maybe 4 seconds between. This is an earthquake, and this building is coming down. 4 seconds is not a lot of time for most people. It's barely enough to process what's happening. Barely enough to take a step. But Rev had trained for 4-second windows her entire life. She didn't run for the stairs. The stairs were already gone. She could hear them cracking apart somewhere behind her. She didn't run for the door. The door frame was old wood and it would splinter like a matchstick. She dropped to the floor, pulled herself against the base of a load-bearing column. The thickest piece of concrete she could find, curled into a ball, covered her head with her arms, and she counted 1, 2, 3. The ceiling came down. Didn't know how long she was out. Could have been 30 seconds, could have been 30 minutes. What she knew was this: she was alive. She was in pain, and she couldn't see a thing. Total darkness. Not dim, not shadowy. Her eyes strained for something, anything to latch onto. There was nothing, not a crack, not a sliver. She tried to move. Her right arm worked, her left arm, pinned at the elbow by something heavy. She twisted, pulled, a concrete shift against her sleeve. Pain shot through her forearm, but the weight moved. A chunk of plaster, not structural. She wrenched her arm free. Bruised, scraped raw, but functional, good. Her right leg was free. Something was wrong with her left leg. She reached down with her right hand, felt along her thigh, past the knee, and then she felt it. A steel rod. Rebar. Half an inch in diameter had cleaned through her left calf, entry just below the knee, exit just above the ankle. She could feel both ends sticking out. Wet, warm. She didn't scream, she wanted to. God, she wanted to. She opened her mouth to cry out. Nothing came. Not a sound, not a whisper. She tried again. Pushed air up from her lungs, felt her throat clench. And nothing. Just a faint rasp like wind through a cracked window. Something had hit her throat during the collapse. The larynx. Swollen, maybe fractured. She couldn't tell without a mirror and a light, and neither of those existed anymore. So she was trapped in the dark. A steel rod through her leg, and no voice. Most people would have started to pray at that point, or cry, or both. And there would have been nothing wrong with that. But Rev did something different. She started breathing, deliberately, controlled. 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold. 8 seconds out box, breathing, modified. The same pattern her father had taught her in the garage of their house in Virginia Beach when she was 11 years old. It eats oxygen, he'd told her. Big hands on her small shoulders, eyes level with hers. And oxygen is the only currency that matters when you're buried. She hadn't understood that at 11. She understood it now. She breathed. Then she started taking inventory, not of her injuries, of her environment. She ran her right hand along the surface beneath her. Concrete, cracked but intact. She reached up. Slabs? Maybe 18 inches above her face. She could feel the texture. Smooth on one side, rough on the other. A floor slab. It had fallen at an angle and wedged against something. A column, maybe, or a beam. Creating a triangular void. She was inside that void, a pocket of survival. Roughly 6 feet long, 4 feet wide, maybe 2 feet tall at the highest point. A coffin with better geometry. The air was thick with dust. Every breath tasted like chalk and iron. But there was air. For now, she listened. Beyond her own breathing, settling groans of concrete and the distant sound of something, still falling somewhere far away. She heard 2 things. First, a man, breathing hard, fast, too fast, panicking. Somewhere to her right, close, of debris, maybe in the same void. She couldn't tell. Seconds of deeper, slower breathing, irregular, wet. Someone else. Farther away, to her left. Someone who's unconscious. 2 other people, at least 2. She needed to get to them. Rev had been a '68 whiskey, combat medic. United States Army, 4 years active duty, 2 deployments. She'd treated gunshot wounds in the back of a Humvee doing 60 miles an hour on a road that was more crater than asphalt. She'd performed field tracheotomies in the dust. She'd held a man's intestines inside his bodies with her bare hands for 45 minutes, while waiting for a medevac that was 20 minutes late. Was work in total darkness, with a steel rod through her own leg and no ability to speak. So this was new. She pulled the belt from her waist. Standard leather belt, nothing special. She wrapped it above the wound on her left calf. Tight, 2 inches above the entry point of the rebar. Pulled it hard enough that she had to bite down on her own tongue to keep from blacking out. Cured it. Improvised tourniquet. Enough. Then she started to move. Crawling with 1 working leg and 1 pinned arm is not something they teach you in medic school. It's not something anyone teaches you. You just figure it out. Then you find a shift. Wait. Drag with 1 elbow, push with 1 knee, and ignore the sound your body makes when it moves in ways it wasn't designed to move. It took her 3 minutes to cover 4 feet. Yes? Her right hand found his boots, then his leg. She followed it up, was lying on his sides, both legs pinned under a concrete beam from mid-thigh down, breathing fast. She pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, racing. One's a 40, maybe 150. Pain and panic. She squeezed his wrist, firm, not gentle. The way you grab someone when you need them to focus. He flinched, then he spoke. Turkish, breathless, desperate. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. He was asking if he was going to die. She squeezed his wrist again, twice, slow, a rhythm, a message. I'm here, you're not alone, stop talking. She ran her hands over his torso. Assessment. No chest wounds she could feel. No obvious bleeding from the upper body. His legs were trapped, but the beam seemed to be compressing, crushing. There was still pulse in his feet. Good. His legs were alive, but then she found it. Right side of his chest. A wound she almost missed. A piece of debris, sharp triangular, had punctured between his ribs. Up, maybe an inch. But enough to compromise the chest wall. She put her ear close to his chest, listened. The right lung sounded diminished. Not collapsed yet, but the seal was broken. Air was leaking in where it shouldn't be. A pneumothorax. If she didn't address it, the pressure would build. The lung would collapse. He'd suffocate. Maybe in an hour, maybe in 3. She needed an occlusive dressing. That seal over the wound to let air out, but not in. She had nothing, no medkit, no tape, no plastic. Then her fingers touched something in the debris near his shoulder, smooth, flexible, of laminated paper. A poster, maybe, or a menu from whatever business had been on this floor. She peeled it off the ground, tore a piece roughly 4 inches square. She pressed it over the chest wound, sides down using strips torn from her own shirt, wet with blood to create adhesion. Left the 4th side open. A flutter valve. Textbook improvised chest seal, a thing they teach at Fort Sam Houston in combat medic training. The man, Kemal, though she wouldn't learn his name for hours, gasped. Then his breathing started to even out. Slightly. Just enough. They patted his shoulder. Twice. Then she started moving again, toward the second sound. The second person was harder. There was a partial wall of debris between them. Broken concrete. Twisted rebar. Chunks plaster. She had to navigate by touch. The movement sent pain shooting up her left leg like electricity. She found him face down, an older man, heavy. She could feel the thickness of his arms, the rough fabric of a work jacket. She rolled him carefully, slow, controlled, supporting his head and neck the way she'd been trained. Why the neck support? Because she didn't know what had hit him, and in a collapse, spinal injuries are the silent killers. Someone wrong, and they never walk again, or they never breathe again. She got him on his back, checked his airway, clear pulse, present but weak, thready, that whispered internal bleeding before her fingers even reached his abdomen. She palpated his abdomen, rigid on the left side, distended. Internal bleeding, probably a ruptured spleen or lacerated liver. Heck was wrongs. She could feel it under her fingers. It's a misalignment, subtle but there. Cervical spine injury, not displaced enough to have severed the cord. He was still breathing on his own, but displaced enough that any sudden movement could finish the job. She needed to stabilize his neck. Right now, he searched the debris around her by touch. Found a piece of flat wood, part of a shelf maybe, and a section of metal conduit, the kind that runs along walls for electrical wiring. She bent the conduit, slowly, carefully, putting the rebar in her own leg as a leverage point, which was a decision she wished she hadn't had to make, into a rough C-shape. Packed the wood and conduit around his neck, secured it with more strips of her shirt, his cervical collar. She checked his breathing again. Still there, still weak, still wet. This man, Gregor, 62-year-old Bulgarian volunteer. She'd actually spoken with briefly that morning over coffee, was in serious trouble. Internal bleeding without surgical intervention was a death sentence on a timeline. They couldn't stop the bleeding. She couldn't even see the bleeding. All she could do was keep him stable, keep his neck from moving, and hope that someone on the surface was already digging. She had 2 patients now, with a compromised chest, one with internal bleeding, and a spinal injury. She had no supplies, no light, no voice, a steel rod through her own leg, and the oxygen in this space was not going to last forever. Sat back against the concrete slab behind her. Took a breath, slow, controlled. The pattern her father taught her. Then she started thinking. Not about survival, about communication. The best medic in the world is useless if no one knows where to dig. It by touch, a piece of rebar, sticking out of the concrete slab above her, about 10 inches long, slightly bent, with enough clearance to swing against the surface beneath her. She tested it. A soft tap. It carried. Not far, maybe, but concrete is a good conductor. Sound travels through solid material better than through air. Any rescue team with listening equipment, geophones, acoustic sensors, would pick up vibration through the structure. But random tapping would just sound like settling debris. The building was still groaning, still shifting. Rescue teams hear thousands from a collapse site. Of them mean nothing. She needed to be specific, unmistakable. She needed to send a message that no one could confuse with noise, Morse code. She hadn't used it in years, not since before her father died, since those afternoons in the garage where he'd sit across, at the workbench, tapping on the wood with a wrench, making her decode messages until she could do it faster than she could read. If you can't talk, you tap. You can't tap, you blink. If you can't blink, you breathe. There's always a way to send a message, Rev. Always. She'd rolled her eyes at 12. At 15, standing at his funeral, she'd paid more attention. At 22, in the army, she'd realized he'd been preparing her for exactly this kind of moment, without either of them knowing it. She gripped the rebar, and she started dot, 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 dash, dot, 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 das, pause, thing. No. She stopped, corrected herself. 3 alive, not child. There was no child. She was a medic and she needed to be precise. She started her message over. Dash. Dot, 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 dash. Dot, dot, dot. Yes. 3 lives then. Medic then. 1 C-spine injury. 1 pneumothorax. Then structure unstable west side then. Do not excavate from west. Each letter tapped out in clean, military standard Morse code. No shortcuts. No slang. The way her father had taught her. The way it had been done for 160 years. She tapped until her fingers ached. Then she rested. Then she tapped again. Dad? And she waited. Above ground, the world was chaos. Antakya had been hit hard. Entire city blocks were flattened. Roads cracked open, water mains burst, and flooded intersections. Dust hung in the air like fog, thick enough to taste. The national response was already mobilizing. Turkish search and rescue, European civil protection teams, medical units from 6 countries, and tucked into the deployment roster, a U.S. Navy SEAL team that had been running joint exercises with Turkish special forces 40 miles up the coast when the earthquake hit. Unit Sierra, 6 operators, led by Lieutenant Commander Jack Harlan. Kaltz, Bishop. The bishop was 44 years old, a man who said less as he learned more. He'd been in Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, and a handful of places that still don't appear on official records. He'd lost friends. He'd lost people he was supposed to save. He'd learned that the distance between alive and dead is usually measured in seconds, not minutes. His team was assigned to the southeast sector, a cluster of collapsed residential and commercial buildings. The worst of it. The area where the soil was softest and the buildings were oldest, and the casualties were expected to be highest. They arrived at 5:15 p.m., 3 hours after the earthquake. The sun was getting low, and the temperature was dropping, and the dust was still thick enough to turn the light orange. Bishop set up a forward operating point in a cleared parking lot. Protocol. Map the sector. Prioritize structures with the highest probability of survivors. Deploy acoustic sensors. Listen. Corporal Denny Cole, 26, the youngest on the team, a communications specialist, was running the geophone array, earphones on, eyes closed, listening to the building talk. Most of what he heard was nothing, settling, cracking, the slow complaints of concrete dying. He heard something else. Cole pulled one earphone back. I've got tapping. Grid reference 47. Bishop walked over, took the earphone, pressed it to his ear. Tap, tap, tap. Irregular, rhythmic, not random. Listened for 10 seconds. 20, his face changed. That's not tapping, he said. Cole looked at him. Sir, that's Morse. He grabbed a pen, started writing. The room went quiet. A man on the team stopped what he was doing and watched Bishop's hand move across the paper. When he finished, he stared at what he'd written. 3 letters. LVS. 3 lives. Then. Medic. Then. Pneumo. Then. Doc. Unstable West. Do not excavate West. Bishop set the pen down, looked at the collapsed building. 6 stories of pancaked concrete and steel. Somewhere in the middle of that, as sending military-grade Morse code and using medical terminology that most doctors don't know off the top of their heads. Coles said what everyone was thinking. Who the hell is down there? Quick answer right away. He stared at the rubble. Then he picked up the radio. Base, this is Sierra Actual. We have confirmed survivors at Grid 47. Minimum 3 souls, 1 with C-spine injury and pneumothorax. And whoever is sending this signal, they're trained, military or former military. They're running triage from inside the collapse. A pause on the radio. Then base, copy Sierra. What do you need? I've looked at his team. Then, back at the building. Everything. The problem was Captain Miles Rourke. Rourke was the International Coordination Officer, 50 years old, British. Former Royal Engineers, smart, experienced, and ruthlessly practical. His job was to allocate rescue resources across the entire southeast sector, and there weren't enough resources to go around. He arrived at Bishop's forward point at 6:30 p.m., looked at the building, looked at the structural assessment, and said the thing that Bishop already knew he was going to say. I can't justify it. Bishop stood with his arms crossed, waiting. That structure is a class 5 collapse, Rourke said. Fake failure. The slab integrity is compromised across the entire footprint. Any heavy excavation risks secondary collapse. You'd need to hand dig. That's 12 hours minimum for a 3-story penetration. He pointed east. Sector B's has 23 confirmed survivors in a partially staying structure. I can get to them in 4 hours with the same resources. I have 3 confirmed alive in there, Bishop said, and I have 23 confirmed alive over there. Rourke's voice was level, not unkind, just math. I don't have enough teams for both. Then I'll use my team. Your team is 6 men. You don't have excavation equipment rated for this. You don't have structural engineers on site. If that building shifts while your men are inside the debris field, I'll have 6 more casualties instead of 3 rescues. Bishop was quiet for a moment. The person sending that Morse code, he said, diagnosed a pneumothorax and a cervical spine injury from inside the collapse. In the dark, to assess the structural load paths well enough to tell us which side of the building will kill us if we dig from it. He paused. Whoever is down there is keeping those other 2 alive. Right now, if it's we stand here talking, that person is bleeding and burning oxygen to keep strangers from dying. Rourke looked at him. I sympathize. I do. But I have a sector to manage. Then manage it. Pull your resources. With 6 mess, no equipment? With 6 men in our hands, Ills. Rourke stared at him for a long time. Then he shook his head. Not in refusal, in something closer to recognition. The look of one soldier seeing something in another soldier that can't be argued with. You've got until morning, Rourke said. If you haven't reached them by dawn, I'm pulling you out. Bishop nodded. You'd better start now. Rourke turned to leave. Stopped. Turned back. Bishop. Whoever is down there, they better be worth it. Bishop looked at the rubble, at the building that was slowly, patiently, to kill everyone inside it. They already are. At p.m. 4 hours and 13 minutes after the earthquake, Bishop established 2-way communication. They'd rigged a pneumatic striker to the surface of the debris pile, a small air-powered hammer that could tap against the concrete in controlled bursts. Morse code going down, same as Morse coming up. Shope tapped first receiving, identify, a pause. Then, from below, but clear through the geophone. Worker, unable to speak, larynx injured. Bishop wrote it down, looked at it. Something flickered across his face, a name Calloway. Something about that name, set it aside. There were more important things right now. He tapped, Smale, 55. Slex trap, chest seal in place, stable, Smale 62. C. Spine, bleeding, DX leaning. Tragicals. Search for. Bishop read it twice, chest seal in place. C. Spine stabilized. This woman had already treated both patients in total darkness with no supplies, and a piece of rebar through her own leg. He tapped. Please? List. Calf implid, hernia pleat. Manageable. Manageable. Bishop almost smiled. Almost. He tapped. We are begin. Excavation. Esaphase. Evasipishuset. What came back changed everything. The tapping went on for several minutes. Slow, deliberate. Each character precise. Ship transcribed as fast as she tapped. She was describing the internal structure of the collapse, not guessing, analyzing. Then she described the position of the load-bearing column she'd sheltered against, the angle of the floor slabs, the location of a secondary support beam that was holding the void open, the direction of greatest instability, and the only one, line of approach that a rescue team could dig along without triggering a progressive collapse that would kill everyone inside, from the east side, through the second floor, at a 30-degree angle to the original floor plane, avoiding the column line on grid C. Chef handed the transcript to his structural advisors, a Turkish engineer named Deniz who'd been assigned to their team. Deniz read it. He ran a ground-penetrating radar scan along the debris surface. He came back with his eyes wide. She's right, he said. She's exactly right. The column on grid Cis-E is the only thing holding the upper slabs in a stable configuration. If we'd gone in from the west, standard approach, we'd have loaded that column laterally and brought the whole thing down. Bishop nodded slowly. She just saved her own rescue, Deniz said. Bishop looked at the collapsed building, at the 6 stories of broken concrete and steel and dust. Somewhere inside that, an 8-year-old woman with a piece of metal through her leg, and no voice was doing everything, to keep 3 people alive, including herself. He turned to his team. We dig from the east. By hand. It stops until we reach them. Cole raised his hand. Sir, what if Rourke gave us until dawn. That's 9 hours. That's enough. And if it's not? Bishop picked up a shovel. Then it'll have to be. The surface, Reverend was losing track of time. That's the thing about total darkness. Without light, without sound, without any external reference point, time becomes elastic. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like days. Pain starts to drift, looking for patterns that aren't there, creating sounds that don't exist. Rev knew this. She'd studied it. Sensory deprivation effects on cognition. She knew that after 6 hours in total darkness, most people begin to hallucinate. After 12, the brain starts to fragment its sense of self. She wasn't going to let that happen. She kept her routine. Check Kamal every 20 minutes. Check Grigor every 15. Her own tourniquet. Tap status updates to the surface every 30 minutes. Kamal had calmed down. His breathing was steady. The chest seal was holding. She checked it by touch, for the telltale bubble of air escaping under the flutter valve, working. His pulse had come down to something reasonable. He spoke to her sometimes, in Turkish. Then in broken English. Fragments. You are doctor? Took his hand. Twice. You are hurt also? 1 squeeze. She didn't want him to worry. What is your name? She tapped on his palm. Rev. Reverv. Like revolution, she squeezed once. Okay, better. You keep us alive, I believe you. Grigor was worse. His pulse was weakening. His abdomen was more distended. The bleeding was continuing. There was nothing she could do about it. Not here, not with nothing. Keep his necks stable. She could keep his airway clear. She could monitor his breathing pattern for signs of shock. But she couldn't stop the bleeding. She knew the math. Grigor needed surgery within hours. Medic, a surgeon, an operating room, blood products, things that existed in a different world from this one. She checked her own tourniquet. The belt was soaked through. Her left leg below the knee was numb, either a good sign or a very bad one. Numb meant the tourniquet was working, cutting blood flow, preventing hemorrhage, but it also meant tissue death was on a clock. Hours with a tourniquet, and the limb starts to die. After that, even if you survive, the leg might not. She didn't know how long it had been. 2 hours? 4? 6? She adjusted the belt, tightened it, a familiar wave of nausea that came with the pain and pushed it down. She breathed, the pattern. Always the pattern. She was tired, so tired, beyond sleep deprivation. This was chemical. Blood loss, stress hormones, estrogen depletion, all conspiring to pull her under. She closed her eyes. In the dark, it made no difference. But the act of closing them was a surrender she couldn't afford. She opened them again, and she thought about her father. Not the folded flag, not the knock on the door at 6 in the morning that changed everything. She thought about the garage. She was 13. Sitting on an overturned bucket. He was across from her, on the concrete floor, tapping on the workbench with a wrench. What'd I say? She'd scrunched her face, concentrating. Something about dinner? He laughed. I said, Mother is going to kill me if we're late again. You were close, though. You got Kill right. That's the important part. He'd laughed again. Then he got serious. Not angry serious. Quiet serious. When he needed her to remember something, Rev, listen to me. There's going to come a day. Maybe. Not soon. Maybe not for a long time. When everything goes dark. When you can't see, second talk, can't move. And everyone around you is scared and hurting and looking for someone to tell them what to do. And that's me. That's you. Because you'll know what to do. Not because you're the strongest. Not because you're the bravest. Practiced. Because when everyone else forgot the fundamentals, you kept drilling. She'd rolled her eyes. 13 years old. What did she know about darkness? Now she knew. She gripped the rebar and she tapped. Step. Grigadilling's hammer counting, closing. In 3 hours. She paused. Then, approached from S2, 30 degrees. Calm line C, repeating herself. She knew the team had the information, but repetition saves lives. In the field, in the dark, in the chaos, you say it again. You say it until you're sure they heard it, and you say it one more time. She tapped the last line. I'm still here. Then she let her hand drop, rest her forehead against the cold concrete. 4 seconds in, 7 hold. 8 out, the building groaned above her. Very far away. She could hear metal on concrete, the faint, rhythmic sound of someone digging. They were coming. She just had to hold on. They dug by hand, not because they wanted to. Because they had to. Any heavy equipment, jackhammers, hydraulic spreaders, excavators, would send vibrations through the debris pile that could shift the load-bearing column on grid. See the one Red had warned them about. The one holding the entire void open. So it was hands, shovels, pry bars, steps, who were trained to operate in silences, in darkness, in conditions that would break most people before the first hour was up. Bishop ran the operation from the surface. Standard seal rotation. In the debris field at all times, digging along the approach Vector Rev had specified. 2 on standby, 2 resting. Rotate every 40 minutes, except nobody was resting. Cole and an operator named Pruitt were first in. To the east face of the collapse, a jagged opening, where the second-floor slab had sheared away from the exterior wall. Inside, the space was a maze of broken concrete, bent rebar, shattered glass, and the slow, distant drip of burst water pipes. They moved in on their bellies. Helmets with headlamps. Dust masks that did almost nothing against the particulate that hung in the air like smoke. Every few feet, they'd stop. Listen, surface with a small hammer and wait for a response. From below, faint but steady. Rev tapped back. She was guiding them. Every few minutes, a new Morse sequence. Left, stop, down 6 inches. A beam on your right before proceeding. Do not touch the vertical rebar cluster at your 2 o'clock. Cole shook his head as he transcribed. He'd been in combat. QB. Close quarters battle. In buildings that were actively being shelled. But he'd never taken tactical directions from someone buried under 40 tons of rubble who couldn't speak. It's like she can see through the concrete, he said into his radio. She can't see anything, Bishop replied. She's reading the structure. She knows how buildings fall apart, calculating where every piece landed based on what she felt during the collapse. Cole was quiet for a moment. "Who is she, sir?" "Right now, she's the smartest person on this site. That's all that matters." They dug, hour after hour, removing debris piece by piece. Each chunk of concrete examined, tested, shifted only after Rev confirmed from below that the movement wouldn't destabilize the structure above. It was slow, agonizingly slow, like diffusing. A bomb the size of a building, where every wire is load-bearing, and you can't see the timer. By 7. Hours after the earthquake, they'd penetrated 12 feet into the debris pile. The void where Reverend and the others were trapped was estimated at another 15 feet in. Bishop stood at the entry point. Looked at his watch. Looked at the building. Dawn was 8 hours away. Rourke's deadline. Went back to the geophone. Tapped. "Ho is Grigor." A long pause. Then pulse weaker. Abdomen more rigid. "He needs blood. I can't give him blood." Bishop closed his eyes. Opened them. He tapped. "We're coming from below. I know." But the way she tapped them, steady, unhurried, certain, told Bishop more than a paragraph could have. She wasn't hoping. She wasn't asking. She was acknowledging a fact. They were coming. She would be alive when they got there. It had become a different thing for Revim. She measured it in pulses now. Grigor's pulse, Kamal's pulse, her own. Every 15 minutes, she reached for Grigor's wrist. Counted, watched the number drop. 92, 88, 84. 80, a healthy resting heart rate for a man Grigor's age, would be somewhere around 70. But Grigor wasn't resting. His body was in compensated shock, his heart pumping faster to make up for the blood he was losing internally. When a heart rate drops during internal hemorrhage, it doesn't mean the patient is getting better. The heart is running out of blood to pump. She knew the trajectory. She'd seen it before. In the field, in the back of a medevac helicopter, in a forward operating base, in a country she'd signed papers saying she'd never talk about. The slow, steady decline of a body that is losing the war against its own damage. Grigor had maybe 3 hours, maybe 4. After that, no amount of surgery would matter. She adjusted his cervical collar, checked that his airway was still clear, and his legs slightly elevated. She'd packed debris under his knees to keep whatever blood he had left circulating toward his vital organs. Field medicine, basic, the kind of thing that buys time when time is all you have. He was awake. He'd been awake for hours now. The panic had drained out of him somewhere around the 3rd hour, replaced by something quieter. Not calm, exactly. Resignation mixed with trust. Stopped asking if he was going to die. He'd started asking about Reverend's, his voice in the dark. "Horse. Careful. Your leg. The metal is bad." She tapped his palm once. "Yes, it was bad. You need help also." One tap. "They help us first?" Because it wasn't a question. Kemal was quiet for a while. Then, in Turkey, we have a word, fedakar. It means someone who gives themselves for others. Not for glory, not for God. They cannot do different. It is who they are. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. Like he was talking to himself as much as to her, my daughter. She is 26. Lives in Istanbul. She is teacher, she. Always giving. I tell her, keep something for yourself. You cannot pour from empty cup, she says. Baba, the cup is never empty. There is always more, he laughed. Quiet, broken, but real. Like you. She would like you, very much. Rev reached out in the dark and found his hand. She held it for a moment, squeezed twice. Then she let go and went back to Grigor. His pulse was 76. At 11:40 p.m., Bishop received a message that changed the math. A structural engineering team from INSARAG, the International Search and Rescue Advisory Group, had arrived in the sector. They had brought ground-penetrating radar that was 2 generations ahead of what Dini's had been using. They ran a full volumetric scan of the collapse. The results confirmed everything Reverend had reported from below. Every column position, every slab angle, every load path. But the new scan also revealed something Rev couldn't have known. The collapse had created a second void, smaller, directly above the one where Rev and the others were trapped, separated by a single floor slab, cracked but intact, and that slab was slowly, incrementally, under the weight of the debris above it, bending, not breaking, but bending, deflecting downward at a rate of approximately 2 millimeters per hour. The structural engineers ran the numbers. At the current rate of deflection, the slab would reach its failure point in approximately 14 hours after that. It would snap, and the 200 tons of debris above it would drop directly onto the void, where Rev was keeping 2 men alive. Hours sounded like a lot. But Bishop's team was 12 feet in with 15 more to go, digging by hand and dawn. And Rorick's deadline was 7 hours away. Bishop stared at the scan results. He picked up the geophone transmitter. He didn't tell Reverend about the slab. Not yet. There was nothing she could do about it, and the last thing she needed was another clock ticking in her head. Instead, he tapped, "Nick Cam. Will reach you within the hour need. Visual assessment. Copy. At 12 a.m., nearly 10 hours after the earthquake." Cole fed the fiber optic camera through a narrow gap in the debris that the dig team had opened. The cables snaked through crevices, past broken pipes, around jagged edges of rebar, of cable. 40. 50. Then the image appeared on the monitor. Bishop saw her. The screen was grainy, green tinted from the camera's infrared mode. But the image was clear enough. A woman, small, upright against a concrete slab, with her legs extended in front of her. Her left calf was swollen to twice its normal size, wrapped in a dark belt that was black with dried blood. A steel rod protruded from both sides of the calf, the ends bent slightly where the rebar had deformed during the collapse. Her shirt was torn, strips missing, used for bandages and tis. Her face was pale. Not white pale. The color of someone who has lost blood and knows it. To her left, an older man on his back, neck braced with what looked like a piece of wood and a bent metal conduit wrapped in cloth. Abdomen was visibly distended, even on the low-resolution camera. To her right, another man, younger legs pinned under a beam, a makeshift dressing on his right side, a piece of laminated paper held down with strips of fabric, and Revd was between them. One hand resting on Grigor's chest, monitoring his breathing, the other hand holding the piece of rebar she'd been using to tap Morse code. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead, not at anything, just open, alert. Present Bishop stared at the screen. Cole stood next to him. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Cole said very quietly, "She built a trauma bay. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of disbelief. Because that's exactly what she'd done. In total darkness, of metal through her own leg. Without saying a single word, she'd triaged 2 patients. Applied an improvised chest seal. Stabilized a cervical spine injury. Created an improvised tourniquet for herself. Elevated Grigor's legs for shock management. Maintained 2-way communication with the surface via Morse code. And she'd been doing all of it for 10 hours straight. Iraq's structural engineer, a Norwegian named Halvard, who'd been doing this work for 20 years. Looked at the screen and then looked at Bishop. "I have never seen anything like that," he said. "They pulled lapses who did extraordinary things to survive. But I've never seen someone build a functioning medical station inside the rubble with nothing." In the dark, Bishop didn't respond. He was watching the screen. Watching Rev's hand Grigor's chest. The way it moved, slightly, rhythmically, timing his breaths, making sure he was still breathing, making sure he was still alive. Something was forming in the back of Bishop's mind, a connection he couldn't quite make. A name, a face from a long time ago, something about the way she worked, the economy of motion, the deliberateness, complete absence of wasted effort. He'd seen someone work like that before. He set the thought aside. There were more immediate concerns. He tapped. "We. See you. Estimated reach time 4-5. Rev looked up at the camera. The infrared LED was invisible to the naked eye, but she knew it was there. She'd felt the cable brush past her shoulder. She held up the rebar. Tapped against the slab above her. "Grigor has 3 hours. Me." Bishop read it, looked at the clock. looked at the debris field 3 hours, and his team was still 15 feet away, digging through reinforced concrete by hand. The math didn't work. He keyed his radio. Patience, this is Sierra Actual. I need every man on the dig. No rotation, no rest. Continuous. Pruitt's voice came back. Sir, we've been going for... I know. Continuous, that's an order. Silence on the radio. Then, I won. Copy. Below the surface. Rev was fading. She could feel it. The way the edges of her awareness were getting soft. The way her thoughts were taking longer to form. They kept losing seconds as... Blinking and finding that time had jumped forward without her consent, blood losses. She'd managed it as well as anyone could with a belt and willpower, but the rebar was still in her leg the time she moved, and she had to move to check her patience, to reach the tapping point. The wound reopened slightly, not gushing, seeping, slow and steady, not fast enough to kill her quickly, slow enough to let her recover. She was cold. The void had been cooling for hours as the residual heat from the collapse dissipated. The concrete around her was pulling warmth from her body, the way concrete does, slowly, without mercy. She checked Grigor. His pulse was 70. His breathing was shallower. His skin, when she touched his face, was cool and clammy. Classic signs of decompensated shock. His body was losing the fight. Adjusted his position. Made sure the collar was secure. Checked the airway one more time. There was nothing else she could do. She'd done everything that was possible to do without surgical tools and blood products and light and a functioning voice. She sat back. And for the first time in 10 hours, she let herself feel it. Not the pain. She'd been managing that since the beginning. The other thing, the thing underneath the pain. Fear, not fear of dying. She'd made peace with that possibility somewhere around hour 4. That medics learn early that death is not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is failing the person next to you. She was afraid of failing Grigor, of sitting in the dark, holding his wrist, letting his pulse slow down beat by beat until it stopped, of being right there, inches away, with the training and the knowledge and the will to save him, and not being able to. That was the fear. Her back against the concrete. Closed her eyes, and she was 15 years old again. Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery, San Diego. A Tuesday, overcast, of California gray. Feels like the sky is holding its breath. The flag was folded 13 times. Tight, perfect, the way they always fold them. 3 sailors in dress whites handed it to her mother. Her mother took it with told. Not then. Later, alone. For weeks, Rev stood next to her mother in a black dress she'd bought the day before. She didn't cry either, not because she was strong, because she was angry. Angry at her father for leaving. Angry at the Navy for taking him. Angry at the world for continuing to turn, as if nothing had happened when everything had happened. After the service, after the guests left, and after her mother closed the bedroom door and the house went quiet, River went to the garage. His garage, where his tools still hung on the pegboard, where his coffee mug still sat on the workbench with a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. She sat on the overturned bucket, his bucket, and she picked up the wrench, his wrench. And she tapped on the workbench, dash, 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 LOVEYOU, it over and over until her hand hurt, and the workbench had dents, and her eyes were so blurred she couldn't see the wall. That was the last time she'd used Morse code, until today. Now, in the dark, in a collapsed building, in a country that wasn't hers, with 2 strangers depending on her, and a piece of metal through her leg, and no voice left to speak with, she reached for the rebar. She didn't tap a status update, tap coordinates or medical information or structural data. She tapped. Then, IMSTILLHERE, nobody on the surface heard it. The taps were too soft. It wasn't meant for them. They held the rebar for a long moment. Then she set it down, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and she went back to work. 17 a.m., the Morse code stopped. Cole was on the geophone. He'd been monitoring continuously. transcribing revs, periodic updates, relaying them to Bishop and the dig team. The rhythm had become familiar to him over the hours. The steady cadence of her tapping, the slight pause between words. The way she always ended a transmission with a single dash. A period military habit. At 2:17, came. Then nothing. Cole waited. 1 minute. 2. 3. He tapped the transmitter. Acknowledged. No response. He tapped again. Request. Nothing. 5 minutes. Cole pulled off his headphones. Walked to Bishop. Said it before his mouth did, sir. The signal stopped. Bishop looked at him. How long? 5 minutes. No response to acknowledgement. No response to status request. Bishop walked to the geophone, the headphones himself, listened. The building was talking. Creaks, groans, the slow language of concrete under stress. But no tapping, no rhythm, no Morse. He tapped. Callow waistep. The building answered with silence. Seconds. 20. 30. Cole stood behind him. The rest of the team had gathered without being called. 6 men standing around a speaker, waiting for a sound that wasn't coming. 40 seconds. Bishop's jaw tightened. It was still on the transmitter. He wanted to tap again, but there's a protocol for this. You send twice. You wait 60 seconds. If nothing comes back, you adjust your assessment. She could be unconscious. She could be dead. They could have shifted position and lost access to the rebar. Or she could be gone. 50 seconds. Pruitt walked over from the tunnel entrance. Dust on his face. Blood on his knuckles. He looked at Cole. Cole shook his head, sat down on a piece of broken masonry, took off his helmet, ran his hands through his hair. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say. You don't narrate moments like this. You just endure them, Cole said, very quietly. Wait, 55 seconds. Bishop exhaled, slow, controlled. The way he'd been taught a long time ago. In a classroom at Coronado, by a man with big hands and hard eyes and a trident on his chest. A man who'd said, the mission isn't over when you're tired. The mission is over when it's done. He couldn't remember why that memory surfaced now. Something about the instructor's face, his voice, a Bishop had carried for 20 years without knowing why. He tapped one more time. Not protocol, just human. Error. You there, 3 seconds. 4, and then he heard it. Tap, faint. That if the geophone hadn't been calibrated to maximum sensitivity, it would have been lost in the background noise of the dying building. Tap. Tap. Not Morse, not words. Just tapping. Irregular. Weak. And trying to remember how to do something their body used to do automatically. Then, a pause. A long one. Bishop held his breath, and then it came. Slow. Halting. Each character separated by gaps that were too long, tapped with a force that was barely enough to register. G, G. Oh, G. Oh, Bishop stared at the transcription pad. 2 letters. Repeating. Not help me. Not I'm dying. Not hurry, go. She'd come back from the edge. From wherever she'd been for those 40 seconds. The border between alive and not alive. The dark place that medics know about, but don't talk about. She'd pulled herself back. And the first thing she'd done, the thing she said the strength to do, was tell them to keep going. Not for her. For Grigor. For Kamal. For the 2 men whose lives were balanced on her presence in that void. Bishop set the pad down on the table, both palms flat. Stood there for a moment, very still, the way men stand when they're trying to keep something inside from getting out. He'd been in combat. He'd seen courage in forms that most people can't imagine. Then carrying wounded teammates through fire. A pilot landing a helicopter with 1 engine on a rooftop in a sandstorm. A dog handler going back into a building that was about to blow because his dog was still inside was different. This was a woman who had nothing left. No blood, no voice, no strength, and the only message she could manage with what remained was not, save me. It was, keep going, for someone else. Staring at the pad. His eyes were wet. He wiped them with the back of his glove and turned away. Bishop set down the headphones, stood up, looked at his team. You heard her, he said. Go. Nobody needed to be told twice. The hours were the longest of Bishop's career. His men dug like they'd never dug before. Not with the mechanical efficiency of trained operators following a protocol, with something more primal, more desperate. The way you dig. That the person on the other side of the wall is dying, and the only thing between you and them is 20,000 pounds of broken building. They'd abandoned the shovels. Too slow. Their knees. Their shoulders. Pulling chunks of concrete out of the tunnel and passing them back in a chain. 3 men in the debris field now. Bishop had overridden his own rotation protocol. Outside, receiving debris and up the tunnel walls with timber and team and steel plates that the Insurag teams had supplied. Rev's Morse came back in fragments. Slower, but it came at 2:45 a.m. Grigor pulse 64. Pain camels. Table. Chest seal holding. At 3:2, just the number. No context. She didn't need to explain. Bishop knew it was Grigor's pulse. Dropping at 3:50 a.m. 58. Bishop did the math. At this rate, Grigor had maybe 90 minutes before his heart didn't have enough blood to pump, and his organs started shutting down irreversible. They were 8 feet away. 8 feet of concrete and rebar and broken pipe and shattered tile. 8 feet that might as well have been 8 miles. At 4:15 a.m., Rev sent a longer message. It took her almost 3 minutes to tap it out. Bishop could hear the effort in each character, the pauses where she had to rest, the slight irregularity where her hand was shaking. Richt, when you reach us, Grigor, first his neck must stay. Stabilize during extraction. Not remove my collar? It is holding C3 foreign plates. Then a pause. Count. Second. His chest seal must stay intact during movement. Have Oak's dressing ready on surfs. Another pause. May last, Bishop read it 3 times. Last. She was the one who had kept them all alive. She was the one who had built a medical station in the dark, communicated with the surface in Morse code, guided the rescue team through the debris. She was bleeding. She was the one who had already crossed into unconsciousness once and dragged herself back, and she was telling them to take her last. Bishop picked up the transmitter. He tapped. Negative. Medic first. I need treatment. The response came back fast. Faster than anything she'd tapped in the last hour. As if the disagreement had given her a burst of energy. Negative. Grigor will D. If delayed. I will not. Grigor first. By assessment. Bishop stared at the pad. Cole, reading over his shoulder, said, "She's pulling rank on you, sir." From under the rubble, Bishop almost laughed. Almost. He tapped. Copy. Grigor first. Kemmel second. But below, 1 final taps, a single dash. Period. Acknowledged. Bishop set down the transmitter, walked to the tunnel entrance, at the dark opening, where his men were pulling apart a building with their bare hands. He picked up a piece of rebar, got on his knees, and he crawled in. He was done giving orders from the surface. At 30 a.m., something changed on the geophone. The Morse had stopped again. But this time, Cole didn't panic, because this time he could hear something else through the sensor. Tapping, but not on the rebar. On flesh. On skin. The tapping on Grigor's chest, the same rhythm, over and over. Tap, tap, pause. Tap, tap, pause. Cole listened. It wasn't Morse. It wasn't a message, it was a heartbeat. She was tapping against Grigor's chest in the rhythm of a heartbeat. Giving his body a pattern to follow. An old field technique. Some medics swore by it. Others called it superstition. To match the rhythm you want, the heart to keep. You tap it on the patient's chest like a metronome. Whether it worked physiologically was debatable. What it meant, emotionally, was not. She was telling him, stay. Keep beating. Stop. At 4:50 a.m., Bishop's voice came over the radio, low, strained. The voice of a man who'd been crawling through a tunnel of broken concrete for 30 minutes. I can hear them. The team froze. I can hear breathing. Distinct sources. Close. Very close. Cole checked the GPR data. Bishop was 3 feet away from the void. 3 feet, Bishop cleared another piece of concrete, then another. His hands were bleeding through his gloves, sometime in the last hour, and kept going. He reached a section of floor slabs. Cracked. A gap. Maybe 6 inches wide. He pressed his face to it, darkness. The smell of blood and concrete, dust and sweat. Close! He could see nothing, but he could hear everything. Kemmel's breathing, steady, stable. Grigger's breathing, shallow, fast, wrong. And a third sound, fainter. A whisper, thin rasp of air through a damaged throat. Rev, she was still alive. He tapped on the slab 3 times, slow. From the other side, 3 taps back, softer than his. But there, Bishop keyed his radio. Sierra Actual to all stations. I have contact, 3 feet from the void. I need the spreader and the shore kit now. Behind him in the tunnel, movement. Equipment being passed forward, hand over hand. A hydraulic spreader. A tool designed to pry apart crashed vehicles, could be used to widen the gap in the slab. But it had to be done carefully. Too much force and the slab could shift, the column could move. Everything they'd worked for would come down on top of them. At 5:10 a.m., the sky outside was turning from black to deep blue. Dawn was coming. Rourke's deadline was coming. Bishop didn't care. He was 3 feet away. I could hear her breathing. He positioned the spreader in the gap, pumped the hydraulic handle, slowly, 1 pump at a time, listening to the concrete respond, feeling the vibration through his hands. The slab groaned, shifted. The gap wide 7 inches. 10. He paused, checked the shoring, checked the column. Still stable, still holding. He pumped again. The gap widened, 12 inches, 14. Enough for a person, barely, but enough. He got the shoring jacks in place, stabilized the opening, double-checked at every contact point. This was not the time for assumptions. He shined his headlamp through the gap, and there she was, Rev Calloway, against the far wall of the void, gray-faced, eyes half open. Her left leg extended, the rebar still through her calf, the belt tourniquet black with blood. Her right hand resting on Grigor's chest, still tapping, tap-tap. Tap? Pause. She wasn't looking at Bishop. She was looking at Grigor, making sure. Until the very last second, making sure his heart was still beating. Bishop moved the light. Pinched? The first light she'd seen in almost 15 hours. She raised her left hand to shield her eyes. Then she lowered it, and she looked at him. She couldn't speak. She couldn't smile. It was too far gone for expressions. But her eyes were clear, focused, present. The eyes of someone who had been to the bottom of what a human being can endure and had decided, actively, deliberately, to stay. Bishop held her gaze, and for a moment in the dust and the dark and the smell of blood and concrete, something passed between them. Not words, not a signal, just recognition. Who understood what it meant to hold the line, looking at another person who had held it longer than anyone should have to. Bishop swallowed, nodded once, then he turned and spoke into his radio, steady, professional, the way he'd been trained, Sierra Actual. I have eyes on all 3 survivors. Preparing for extraction. Grigor first, cervical precautions. Have the surgical team standing by on the surface. They looked back at Rev. She lifted her hand from Grigor's chest slowly, and she pointed at Grigor, then at the gap, him first. Even now, even at the end. Even with nothing left, him first. Bishop nodded. Him first, he said. Hand dropped. She leaned her head back against the concrete, and she closed her eyes, not in surrender. In trust, for the first time in 15 hours, Reverie Calloway let someone else take over. Not because she wanted to, because she'd done everything she could. Every last thing, and now it was their turn. The building groaned around them. The dust settled. And somewhere above, through 40 feet of broken concrete and steel, the first pale light of dawn was touching the horizon. It moved fast, not rushed. Fast, there's a difference. Rushed is sloppy. Fast is deliberate at higher speed. 22 years of training had burned that distinction into his bones. He crawled through the gap into the void. The space was smaller than he'd imagined from the camera feed. 6 feet by 4. Maybe 2 feet of clearance at the highest point. 3 human beings and a lifetime of debris packed into a space the size of a bathroom closet. He could taste it immediately. Thin, stale, heavy with carbon dioxide, and the metallic tang of blood. They'd been breathing this for 15 hours, of the fact that they were still conscious, that any of them were still alive, was a matter of physics and stubbornness in roughly equal measure, he went to Grigor first. The way Rev had told him. The way she was still telling him. And comes. Even with her hand fallen to her side, Grigor was barely there. His skin was cold. His breathing was shallow. Maybe 8 breaths a minute. His pulse, when Bishop pressed 2 fingers to his neck, a threadbare flutter. 52 beats per minute and falling. Bishop examined the cervical collar Revedon had built. A piece of shelving wood, a bent section of electrical conduit, strips of shirt. It looked like something from a field hospital in a war zone, crude, improvised, and exactly right. The alignment was good. The stabilization was holding. If she hadn't done this in the first hour, I would be paralyzed. Or dead. Base. Sierra Actual. I need the backboard and C collar through the tunnel. Now, and I need Halvard's team ready to receive. This man's got maybe 30 minutes. The backboard came through in pieces. The tunnel was too narrow for it to pass intact. Cole and Pruitt assembled it inside the void, working by headlamp, their shoulders pressed against the concrete walls. Positioned himself at Grigor's head, Cole at his feet. Pruitt stabilized the torso. On 3, maintain cervical alignment. Do not let his head rotate. She's holding C3, C4 with that collar, and if we lose it, 1, 2, 3. They lifted Grigor onto the backboard, smooth, controlled. The kind of movement that looks easy and takes years to learn. They secured his head with padding torn from their own equipment. At Rev's improvised collar, with the proper one they'd brought through the tunnel. Bishop paused. Looked at the improvised collar one more time. Then he set it aside carefully. Like it mattered. Because it did. Move him, and Pruitt fed the backboard through the gap into the tunnel. Inch by inch. The tunnel was barely wide enough. Concrete scraped against the board. Dust fell from the ceiling. Every few feet, that pulled while the men inside it. It took 11 minutes to move Grigor from the void to the surface. When the backboard emerged into the gray pre-dawn light, the surgical team was waiting. They had the field kit open. IV lines ready, blood products warming. The surgeon, a German woman named Lena, who'd been doing disaster medicine for 15 years, took one look at Grigor's abdomen and said 2 words, operating now. They had him on the table within 90 seconds. Lena opened him up right there, in a tent on a parking lot, in a destroyed city, while the sun came up behind her. She found the ruptured spleen, clamped it. Again the transfusion. Grigor's heart rate was 48 when she opened him. It was 56 by the time she closed. He was going to make it, barely. This her off him, by the width of a hair and the skill of a surgeon, of a woman who had held his neck. Straight in the dark for 15 hours. He was going to make it because Ian Calloway had decided he was going to make it. Ash. And she had not allowed the universe to disagree. In the void, Bishop turned to Kemal. Kemal was awake, alert. His eyes tracked Bishop's headlamp, with the desperate focus of unseen light in half a day. You are the soldiers? Kemal said. English was broken but functional. His voice was raw from dust and dehydration. Navy, Bishop said. We're going to get you out. Okay. Kemal nodded rapidly. Then he grabbed Bishop's arm. Hard, but her first. Take her first. She is worse than me. Her leg, the metal. She is bleeding very much. For hours, Bishop looked at Revram. She was still against the wall. Eyes closed, breathing shallow. The cat on her left calf was soaked. What? But stiff. The kind of saturation that happens when bleeding has been going on for so long that the fabric has absorbed, dried, absorbed again, and dried again. Layers her face was the color of old paper. Gray-white, bloodless. Her lips had a blue tinge that Bishop recognized, peripheral cyanosis. Not enough oxygen in the blood, not enough blood in the body. It needed to be extracted now. But even as he calculated this, Rev opened her eyes. Just barely. She looked at him. Then she looked at Kemal. Then she raised her hand, trembling, the effort visible in every finger, and pointed at Kemal. Bishop stared at her. For a long moment he considered overriding her. He outranked her. He outweighed her. He could simply pick her up and carry her out. And she couldn't stop him, and she couldn't argue about it because she couldn't speak. But he didn't, because he understood something. This wasn't stubbornness. This wasn't martyrdom. A medic following protocol. In triage, you don't extract based on who is most injured. You extract based on who can be saved fastest and moved safest. Kemal's legs were pinned, but his vitals were stable. His chest seal was holding. He could be freed and moved quickly. Reverend's rebar empalement was complex. Removing her would require cutting the steel, managing the wound, controlling the bleeding. It would take time, during which the void could shift, the slab could fail, and anyone still inside would die. She wasn't being a hero. She was being a medic. Bishop nodded. Kemal, we're getting you out. The beam hitting Kemal's spreader. Bishop positioned it carefully, checking with his hand along the concrete to make sure the pressure wouldn't transfer to the column. On grid C, he pumped. The beam lifted. 3. Enough for Pruitt to slide Kemal's legs free. Kemal gasped. Then he cried, not from pain, though the pain must have been extraordinary, as blood rushed back into legs that had been compressed for 15 hours. He cried because he was free, because after half a day of lying in the dark, unable to move, waiting to die, someone had come. They got him onto a stretcher. Before they moved him toward the gap, Kemal reached back toward Reverend. His voice cracked. Thank you, Fedekar. You are Fedekar. Rev didn't open her eyes. But her right hand moved, just slightly. A small wave, or maybe just a tremor. It was hard to tell. Kemal was pulled through the tunnel. When he reached the surface, he grabbed the first tick he saw by the collar and said, The woman is still inside. She cannot talk. She has metal in her leg. She saved us. She saved all of us. Please, the medic nodded. They're getting her now. Please hurry. She is very tired. Kemal sat on the ground, wrapped in a thermal blanket, legs swollen, discolored, but alive. Like a man. Watching a door that someone he loves is supposed to walk through, he stayed there. Until they brought her out. He didn't move until he saw the stretcher emerge, until he saw her face, gray, the oxygen mask fogging with each breath. Until he knew she was alive. Then he put his face in his hands and he wept. At 8 a.m., the ground moved, not the big one, not like yesterday, but enough. A 6.2 aftershock that rolled through the already destroyed city like a reminder. Like the earth saying, I'm not done. Bishop felt it in his knees first, his hands. The concrete beneath him vibrated. Dust fell from the slab above, a shower of gray particles that turned his headlamp into a solid beam of light. He looked up. Lab. The one the Insurag team had identified as the critical failure point was moving, not falling, not yet, but shifting. Rotating slightly on its support point, a cracked section flexing under the redistribution of weight from the aftershock. He heard it before he saw it, a deep, grinding groan. The sound of concrete being asked to do something it can no longer do. The slab was pivoting, dropping, the west side rising, and directly beneath the east side, directly in the path of what would be 200 tons of debris if the slabs let go, was Grigor's former position. Empty now, but next to it, against the wall, still unable to move under her own power, was Rev calculated. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. If the slab failed, everything above it would come down. The void would cease to exist. And inside would cease to exist. He'd reach at the gaps. He was 5 feet from the opening. He could be through it and into the tunnel and safe in 4 seconds, or he could reach Rev. She was 6 feet in the other direction. He couldn't do both. 1 second gone. He didn't think about it. Thinking would have taken too long. The decision was made by something older than thought, something that lived in the same place where a father teaches a daughter to breathe in the dark. In the same place where a man stands in front of a classroom of exhausted, but candidates, and says the thing that separates the ones who quit from the ones who don't. Bishop launched himself across the void, hit the ground next to Rev, covered her body with his, wrapped his arms around her head. Then the slab groaned, cracked, and held, not fully. A section of the east edge broke free, maybe 300 pounds of concrete, and dropped into the void. It hit the spot where Grigor had been lying, exactly where Grigor had been lying. If they hadn't extracted him 12 minutes earlier, he would be dead. The rest of the slab held, barely. The crack had propagated another 8 inches. The deflection had increased. The column. The one Reverend had identified in her very first Morse transmission, the one she'd told them not to load, the one that had been the silent guardian of this void for 15 seconds, was still standing. Stay on top of Reverend for 10 seconds, 15. Listening to the building, decide whether to live or die. Feeling the concrete settle, waiting for the next sound, silence. He lifted himself off her, slowly checked her. Her eyes were open, wide, the most alert she'd been in hours. Adrenaline will do that. One last gift from a body that has nothing left to give. She looked at him, and in that look was something that didn't need Morse code or words or language of any kind, thank you. Bishop touched her shoulder. Brief, firm. We're leaving now. Both of us. She didn't argue. No one left to argue. For Grigor was out. Kemal was out. The only person left in this void was her, and for the first time in 15 hours, she had no reason to stay. The rebar was the problem. A half-inch steel rod through her left calf, entry below the knee, exit above the ankle. You can't just pull it out. The rod might be pressed against an artery, acting as its own plug. And the bleeding could become catastrophic. In a hospital, they'd image it first. CT scan angiogram. Figure out exactly what the rod was touching before they moved it. There was no hospital. The void that was about to collapse and a tunnel that was narrowing by the minute as the aftershock had shifted the debris above it. Bishop keyed his radio. I need the bolt cutters. Now, through the tunnel in 30 seconds. Cole crawled in behind them. His face was white with dust and something else. Concern, fear, the expression of a young man who understood that what happened in the next 5 minutes would determine whether this story ended with 3 saves or 2. I'm going to cut the rod on both sides, Bishop said. This Rev, though she couldn't answer. 6 inches of clearance on each end. We'll leave the section through your leg in place. The surgical team will handle it on the surface. I need you to stay still. Rev looked at him. A blink. Understood. Bishop positioned the bolt cutters on the rebar, above the entry point. The steel was half-inch mild steel. Tough, but within the cutter's capacity. He aligned the jaws. Steadied his hands, Cole. Their leg. Don't let it move. Cole wrapped both hands around Rev's calf above and below the wound. He could feel the rod beneath the skin. Rigid, immovable. Bishop squeezed the handles. The snap was loud in the small space. The rod vibrated. Rev's body went rigid, every muscle locked, her back arching off the concrete, her mouth open in a scream that produced no sound. The cords of her neck stood out, her eyes clamped shut. Then she went limp, and still conscious. One more, Bishop said. Other side, he repositioned the cutters below the exit wound, same alignment, same steadiness. Snap, Rev's body jerked again. Shorter this time. The rod was cut. 6 inches of steel still through her calf, but free from the debris. She could be moved. Bishop and Cole lifted her onto a stretcher. She weighed almost nothing. The blood loss and dehydration had taken everything that wasn't bone and willpower. As they positioned her, Bishop noticed something. A thin chain around her neck, silver, had been hidden under her shirt. Torn and displaced during the 15 hours of movement and work, now it hung free. A pendant swinging slightly as they moved her. He didn't look at it. Not yet. There were more important things. They fed the stretcher into the tunnel. Reverend's eyes were closed again. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. Her pulse, when Bishop checked it at her wrist, was 120. Compensatory tachycardia. Her heart was racing to circulate whatever blood she had left. They moved fast, through the tunnel. Past the sections they'd dug through the night, the shoring spatjacks, and the timber braces, and the chunks of concrete stacked along the walls, slick cairns marking this path. The tunnel seemed longer going out than it had going in. It always does. They're carrying someone who might die. Distance becomes elastic. Every foot feels like 10. At 5:52 a.m., The stretcher cleared the tunnel entrance. Daylight. Real daylight. It had crested the horizon, and the sky was pale gold, and the air, even the dusty, smoke-tinged air of a destroyed city, was sweet compared to what they'd been breathing underground. The medical team swarmed, in her right arm within 15 seconds. Sane wide open, oxygen mask on her face, blood pressure cuff on her left arm. Monitors beeping, her blood pressure was 74/40, critically low, a kind of number that makes doctors start moving very fast and talking very quietly. They started a blood transfusion. O negative, universal donor, putting it in under pressure because her veins were collapsing, and there wasn't time to be gentle. Rev's eyes fluttered open. She saw the sky, the real sky, blue and gold and impossibly wide after 15 hours of darkness. She reached up with her right hand, the one without the IV, and touched her own throat. Tried to speak. Nothing. Still nothing. She let her hand drop. Bishop stood beside the stretcher, watching the medical team work, watching them do the things that Reverend had been doing alone, in the dark, with nothing. Except now they had lights and monitors and drugs and blood products and everything that she hadn't had. He looked down at her, and that's when he saw it. The pendant. It had fallen to the side of her neck, resting on the stretcher pad. Silver chain, small pendant. He could see the shape now in the daylight. A trident. Bishop stopped breathing. He reached down, slowly, the way you reach for something that might change everything. Picked up the pendant between his thumb and forefinger. Turned it over. The front was a Navy SEAL trident. Small, maybe 1.5 inches, that families wear. Not the pin itself, a replica. A remembrance. He turned it over, on the back engraved in small, clean letters. Stee. Calloway. Never leave anyone behind. Bishop's hand closed around the pendant. Calloway? Senior Chief. Donovan Calloway. The name hit him like a concussion wave. Not the kind that knocks you down. The kind that rearranges everything you thought you knew about where you were standing. Bishop was 22 years old, lying in the surf at Coronado Beach during Hell Week, day 4, no sleep in 90 hours. His body was hypothermic. His skin was raw. His mind was a fog of pain and exhaustion and the absolute, bone-deep certainty that he could not do this for one more minute. He was reaching for the bell. The brass bell that hung on the pole near the beach. The bell you ring when you quit. The bell that means it's over. That you tried and it wasn't enough and you're going home. His hand was 6 inches from it. And then a voice. Low, calm, not yelling. Every other instructor was yelling. This one wasn't Harlan. Bishop turned, stood behind him. Tall, broad, trident on his chest. Hands behind his back, face absolutely still. Senior Chief Donovan Calloway. You want to ring that bell? You ring it. Nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to judge you. You'll go home. You'll have a fine career. You'll sleep in a warm bed tonight. Bishop stared at him, shaking, broken. But here's the thing, son. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering about SEAL training, about yourself, about what you were capable of if you'd just held on for one more minute. Calloway squatted down, eye level enough that Bishop could see the lines around his eyes and the small scar on his jawline and the absolute unshakable steadiness in his gaze. One more minute, Harlan. That's all I'm asking. Then you can decide. Then 4 minute, then one more. Then one more after that. He graduated. Calloway pinned the trident on his chest, shook his hand, said 2 words, knew it. 3 years later, he was killed as hostage rescue operation in East Africa. Bishop was on the other side of the world. He heard about it on a Tuesday morning. He walked behind the barracks and stood there for a long time, looking at nothing, to say thank you. Never got to tell Calloway that everything he'd become, every mission, every life saved, every decision made under fire, traced back to that moment on the beach, to one man who didn't yell, just asked for one more minute. And now, 19 years later, standing in a destroyed city, holding a trident pendant that belonged to that man, looking at that man's daughter on a stretcher, a daughter who had done exactly what her father would have done, who had held on, not for one more minute, for 15 more hours, in the dark, in silence, with metal through her leg and no voice and two strangers who needed her more than she needed herself. Never leave anyone behind. She hadn't. Bishop's throat tightened, his vision blurred. He blinked it clear, took a breath. His radio. When he spoke, his voice was steady, almost. There was a crack in it, small the kind that only someone who knew him very well would have noticed, but it was there. The first crack in 22 years. Base, Sierra Actual. Go ahead, Sierra. All 3 casualties extracted. Repeat. 3 for 3. All alive. Copy, Sierra. Outstanding work. A pause. Bishop looked at Revan, at the pendant in his hand, at the engraving. Base, ahead the medic. The woman who kept them alive down there. Her name is Reverie Calloway. Silence on the radio. She's the daughter of Senior Chief Donovan Calloway. The silence deepened. Not the silence of dead air, of men who know that name, who served with that name, who remember what that name means. Bishop swallowed. She's Calloway's daughter. And she just held that building together for 15 hours with her bare hands. 6 spokes. 5 seconds. 10. Then from base a voice older. Rough, the kind of voice that has years in it and salt and weather and things that don't wash off. A voice that Bishop recognized. Master Chief Warren Briggs, retired, now working as a civilian advisor on the deployment. A man who had served with Donovan Calloway for 8 years. The voice says 4 words. Bring her home. Bishop looked down at Rev. Her eyes were closed, the oxygen mask fogged with each shallow breath. The IV line was running. The blood was going in. The monitors were beeping. He placed the pendant back on her chest. Gently, the way you put something back where it belongs. Yes, Master Chief. We're bringing her home. Arrived at 6:15 a.m. Dawn. His deadline. He walked through the forward operating point without speaking. Past the equipment. Past the dig team. Smith sitting on the ground, hands bandaged, gloves shredded, his gray with dust and exhaustion past. Cole, who was sitting with his back against a wall, staring at nothing. He stopped in front of Bishop. Bishop stood. Not at attention. Just stood. When they've done what they came to do, and they're not interested in discussing whether it was permitted. Rourke looked at him for a long time. 3 for 3, he said. 3 for 3. Rourke nodded. Oh. Then he extended his hand. Bishop took it. Nothing else was said. Nothing else needed to be. There are moments between men who do hard work where words become unnecessary, where a handshake carries the weight of everything that could have gone wrong and didn't, because someone refused to let it. Rourke turned. Walked back the way he'd come. Paused. Turned his head, not quite looking back. The record, Bishop. You were right. Then he was gone. The beach. October. The Seal Memorial is not a grand monument. It doesn't try to be. It's a wall of names. Bronze letters on stone, set back from the road, trees that have been growing there longer than most of the names have been etched. There is a bench in front of it. Simple. Wooden. The kind of bench that suggests you should sit for a while, that leaving too quickly would be inappropriate. Reb Ev Calloway walked slowly up the path. She used a cane now. Her left leg had been saved, but the nerve damage from the rebar and the tourniquet had left her with a permanent limp. The doctor said it might improve with time. She said it didn't matter. She wore jeans, a gray jacket, and her hair was longer than it had been in Turkey. She'd stopped cutting it short after she left the army, and now it fell past her shoulders. The trident pendant hung around her neck, as it always did. She reached the wall. The name. 3rd row from the bottom. 7th from the left, Donovan R. Calloway. Senior Chief. Never leave anyone behind. She stood there for a long time. The wind came off the ocean. Virginia Beach wind that smells like salt and distance and everything you left behind when you went. Somewhere you might not come back from. She raised her right hand, placed her fingertips against the bronze letters of her father's name, the edges, the cold metal warming under her touch, and she tapped dot dash dot dot dash 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 dot 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 dash dot dash dot dash 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 dot dot dash. OVEYOU. She'd tapped on his workbench at 15, the same rhythm, the same spacing. She let her hand rest on his name, closed her eyes. I didn't leave them, Dad. Her voice was back, mostly. Still hoarse, still thin. The doctors said the vocal cords had healed, but the scar tissue would always be there. She'd always sound like she was speaking through a long hallway. Like her words had to travel farther than other people's to reach the air. And I didn't leave them. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn around. She knew who it was. She'd known he would come. Men like Bishop always come back to the wall. Sooner or later, everyone does. And Bishop stood beside her. Not close. Not far, the exact distance that says I'm here, and I'm not intruding, and I'll leave if you want me to. He looked at the name on the wall, the name he hadn't stood in front of in 20 years. The wind blew, the trees moved. Somewhere down the path, a jogger passed and didn't look up. He would have been proud of you, Bishop said. Rev kept her hand on the name. Didn't know me down there. You didn't know whose daughter I was. No, but you stayed anyway. You dug anyway. Yes. Why? Bishop thought about it. For a long time, longer than most people would have waited for an answer. But Reverend was good at waiting. She'd had practice. Because you were still tapping, he said. Anyone who can be buried for 15 hours with a piece of metal through their leg and no voice and 2 dying strangers and still send the message, keep going. That person is worth every minute and every risk and every broken rule in the book. He paused. I didn't know you were Calloway's daughter, but I knew you were someone's, and whoever raised you. They did something right. Rev smiled, small. Mostly in her eyes, she reached into her jacket pocket. Ding. A coin. She'd had it made on the front, a trident. On the back, engraved in small letters. A single line of Morse code, ... dash, sauce. Didn't stand for save our souls anymore, she said. Not for me. She placed the coin on the ledge beneath her father's name. Beside the other coins that other men had left over the years, small tokens, quiet promises for still on station. Bishop looked at the coin, then at her, then at the name on the wall. He didn't say anything for a moment. Sit in your chest for 20 years. And when they finally have a place to go, you need a second to let them move. He reached into his own pocket, took out his own challenge coin, the one he'd carried since Bud Sesh, the one with the class number, and the date, and the words that every SEAL candidate hears, and most of them forget, and a few of them carry for the rest of their lives. The only easy day was yesterday. He placed it next to hers. There. 2 people who understood something that most people will never have to understand. That the worst moments of your life are sometimes the ones that show you exactly who you are. That darkness is not the absence of light. It's the place where you find out whether you can make your own. Rev tapped the wall one last time. Light. Silent. ... .bye. Then she turned. Bab's arm. Not because she needed help walking, but because sometimes leaning on someone is a choice, not a weakness. And they walked down the path together. Behind them, the wall stood in the shade of the old trees. The names gleamed in the October light, and the wind carried the salt smell of the ocean across the bronze letters, and the small coins, and the quiet, permanent memory of men and women who held the line, who held it when no one was watching, who held it in the dark, who never left anyone behind. And somewhere in a garage in Virginia Beach that still smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee, a wrench sat on a workbench, touched for 13 years, waiting for a hand that would never pick it up again, but the rhythm it had taught was still alive, still tapping, still reaching through the darkness, still finding someone on the other side